everybody. Welcome. Now let me see if I can get this phone to stand up. Alright, hold on, let me flip this around. Hope everybody's doing well. Alright, why don't you say something, just make sure the people can hear you, okay?
Okay, hey, this is Curtis Walker, Professor Walker. Can everyone hear me?
I get a 1 if you hear him. Landley Tay-Nose.
Alright, there's a 1, so I think we're good.
Yep. I'll let everybody say their 1s.
Alright, good. We got a few 1s.
Yeah, so like I said, why don't you start by just introducing yourself, talk about you.
Sure, yeah. My name is Curtis Walker, and I am a professor at East Los Angeles College. I'm the department chair there. And just a little bit about my background is I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. I was on Camp Pendleton for my first couple of years, and then I was in Marine Security Forces at the Naval Air Station North Island, and got to do a lot of really cool stuff, all kinds of really fun things that you get to do in Marine Security Forces. And then when I got out, I became a police officer in Tucson, Arizona. I started as a correctional deputy in the Pima County Sheriff's Department, and then I transferred over to the city, became a city police officer. I did that for 7 years, and then left and luckily got into education. And just so you kind of know the background of why I left, I wasn't terminated, fired. People always ask questions like that. No. I kind of came to a realization at some point that the career of a police officer, it really wasn't for my personality. I didn't enjoy it. I mean, I enjoyed certain things about my job, but overall, it wasn't really good for me. It wasn't really good for my family. It started to change my personality, and I think everyone in my family would tell you I'm much happier, and my kids, my family, my wife is much happier. But that doesn't mean, even though part of my experience was a little negative, that I don't want people to be police officers. Because then when I teach, I try to teach from a perspective of treating people with human dignity and respect, and also knowing if your personality is cut out for it, because mine really in the long run wasn't.
Yeah, well, at least you realized it before, going postal or something.
Yeah, well, it wears on you. It wears on you over time.
Right. Well, okay, now, of course, the biggest question, I see it flying by, not questions, but statements, of course, and I always want to know, too, is the flag behind you, and I don't know if you could see that picture I put up of you, but
Correct.
It's the flag. Now, that's a very sore subject for us because,
I've seen the comments, yeah.
I mean, it's, honestly, we view it as a desecrated American flag, and you, as a veteran, I would think that that might bother you. I mean, can you kind of tell us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I'd never even seen or heard of it described that way until my other video, and people were upset about the flag. And the way I see it is that the flag honoring police and fire service, and that's really all it is. I've never seen it or thought of it as a desecrated American flag.
Right. Well, I mean, one in particular, we got Monkey83 in the channel. He's also a Marine veteran. And, I know for him, he sees the blue line flag, he sees red. So, I mean,
yeah.
Can you accept that we see this as an insult?
I mean, I can understand that position, because especially now that I've seen and heard what a lot of people say, But I would say that from the perspective, could you understand the perspective of law enforcement people that don't see it that way? They see it as something honoring what they do.
Well, here's a scenario, let me tell you, that just happened the other day.
Sure.
One of our guys in Oklahoma, he came across a police station that was flying the blue line flag at half-mast for Bush instead of the American flag. So
that's probably ill-advised. I mean, I wouldn't do that. You have your American flag is what should fly at half-mast. Yeah, I wouldn't have done that. I don't think the flag itself, to me, isn't a problem, but doing that, yeah, flying it in place of the American flag, that's silly. Never should have done that.
We've seen it, you know, both flags on the same. We've seen police stations that don't have an American flag at all. They only have the blue line flag. You know, that to me speaks volumes in terms of the thin blue line. You know, I don't know if you were watching Black Label Cop Watch's live stream before this, but he was playing the body cam. You've probably seen it, but the body cam footage of a police officer that was pulled over drunk and starts blubbering like a fool when they're giving him the test. The point is, he kept saying, well, but I'm a cop. I'm a police officer. The guy would say, do you want to take a test? Well, I'm a cop. You know, do you have your gun? It's in the center console. I'm a cop. Obviously, he's trying to get preferential treatment.
Right. Oh, I've seen police officers do that.
Okay, what is your take on that? I mean, do you feel police officers?
That's insane. Now, because if you're a police officer, and here's my honest take. Now, if I were to pull over someone who's a police officer, and it was a minor traffic violation, I would probably use the same discretion on writing that ticket that I would if it was one of my neighbors, a friend, anyone else, because if this is a minor thing, they rolled through a stop sign, you can tell that person the same thing that I would tell anybody else. If I pulled someone over and it ended up being my next door neighbor, I'm not going to write my next door neighbor a ticket. I would have said, and this is somebody who I probably wrote maybe one ticket a month at the most in my police career. I was never a traffic officer. But if there's a criminal violation, a DUI, anything, a serious traffic violation, somebody doing 100 miles an hour, something that's beyond a tiny minor violation, no, they get a ticket, they get arrested, and on my department, the DUIs are one of the things that probably did officers in just about as much as anything. And there should be zero tolerance for that. And somebody that starts throwing their badge out, that, depending on, and I know sometimes people don't believe this, but depending on the officer you get, that's just going to upset them. If somebody badged me, you know, that's just an irritation. Officers actually don't like that, and I know officers that do it. I've heard an officer that tells me how he drives a motorcycle without a motorcycle's license, and I said, "Well, how do you do that? Aren't you afraid you're going to get a ticket?" He goes, "Oh no, I just throw out my sheriff's badge." And I'm like, "Are you serious?" So I know there's cops that have that attitude, and it's absolutely wrong. There's like not one thing good about that attitude. It causes disrespect for the law, disrespect for law enforcement, and it's bad for our law enforcement community.
Okay, well, now I've got a question that comes to you from, now Monkey, just so you know, Monkey 83, the former Marine, is like dying to debate with you about the flag. I don't have a second line for him to call in at the moment, but Monkey, his channel is Law and Smoke. You check out his channel. But
yeah, and if he wants to send me messages, because I actually have my email address there.
Right.
And he can send me something, and we can chat. I don't mind doing that at all.
Okay, wait. I've got, now this question comes from New England Truth. He's one of our downstate New York / New England auditors. He asked, this is going to be kind of a tough question, but I agree it should be asked. He says, in the first video about auditors, you inferred that you stood up against problematic officers on occasion. Why only on occasion?
When I encountered it.
Okay.
That would be, so it's not really like, oh, I selectively said, hey, I'm not going to stand up for this officer or that officer. I did repeatedly, and I would think that if your auditors spent some time in the city of Tucson, and I know James, I don't want to get the name wrong, but he was one of the auditors that actually did a video in Tucson. I think you would find police officers in that city, and I know there'll be some disagreements from the comments. You are taught, and I was taught from the police academy, to treat people with human dignity and respect. And I know from going from place to place, that is not always true. I've seen people act and behave differently in other places. I worked with police officers that weren't good guys. But for the most part, those type of officers eventually got rooted out. And there's an article in Tucson Weekly, which is a publication that's definitely not pro-police in any way. And it was from a couple years ago, and it was talking about why there's been a lack of anti-police protests in Tucson comparable to other cities, like during the Black Lives Matter movement. And one of the officers they interviewed, he said about, one of the things he talked about was how when we have somebody that's doing things the way they're not supposed to, they get pulled aside. Now, from my own experience of doing that, I got mixed reactions. I had people that supported me. I had officers that would say, you did the right thing. And then I had other ones that shunned me over it. I suffered, and I put in the comments, I suffered personal consequences. I had a brand new Toyota truck that someone keyed in the police parking lot. It was a police officer. There's no way it wasn't. And I just wish there had been video at that time of the parking lot. I had somebody take a police car and they door dinged my car. Now, and I don't mean door dinged. I mean they opened their door very hard and dented my car as just a passive aggressive, right, coming after me. And I had officers that wouldn't speak to me, some that wouldn't come on my calls. You know, where I went through a very rough patch over that. And what I used to do is when somebody was treating me in that manner, I would corner them usually in the parking lot of the police station. And if there's any Tucson people here, this was the Prince Road police station on the west side. And I would corner them and say, this is what happened. This is the incident. Look me in the eye and say you would have done it differently. And I only had one or two people that actually could look me in the eye and say, yeah, you were wrong to rat out this officer. Most people, once they actually heard the circumstances of the story, were like, oh, I did that. I would have done the same thing. Okay. And so, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, kind of part of this is Boomer asks, you know, have you ever or would you ever turn in a cop that you saw was breaking the law in any way?
Yeah,
and if so, can you tell us?
You want to hear about, like, one of the incidents?
Yeah, like, what is the most extreme incident?
And see, the thing is, most of them were fairly minor, I think. You know, like one, I mean, I'm talking like a legal search, somebody destroying evidence at a scene where he took cocaine off a subject, and instead of, you don't have to arrest somebody. That's one of the things that sometimes there's confusion about. So let's say I find drugs, and depending on the circumstances of it, I don't necessarily have to arrest somebody. I can write the report up, get it, send it off to the DA, and let the DA decide whether or not they're going to file charges, because there may be an issue that makes it so it's difficult to prosecute it. So this guy takes cocaine off somebody, and instead of arresting the person, which there was clearly evidence at this point to arrest, he takes the cocaine out in the parking lot, just throws it on the ground and like grinds it into the ground. And I'm like, what is that? And he's like, oh, it wasn't a usable amount. He makes some sort of excuse. Well, this happened twice in the same night. And it turned into then an internal affairs issue where I went to a supervisor, told the supervisor what happened, and it was a very unpleasant period of time, because then when I was called in and being interviewed, I had to, say exactly what happened, and I had officers upset with me. This particular officer, thought I had betrayed him, and it was unpleasant. Now, there's nothing really terribly exciting about that. It's not any sort of crazy excessive force training day movie kind of stuff.
Right.
But that's kind of more of the reality of what I've seen of police misconduct, things like that. Police officers talking badly to someone. Like I had a particular officer who his normal course of activity is that when he would be talking to someone on the street, if anybody again is familiar with Tucson, on the west side of Tucson, a lot of drugs, a lot of prostitution, and he would talk to some of these people like they were less than people, less than humans. And we had a call where he was talking to 3 people, and I was standing back a little bit away, and afterwards he came over to me and said, hey, why were you standing a little bit farther away? And I told him, I just don't like the way you talk to people. That incident right there, just the fact that I would dare to tell him, in his mind now I was the worst cop ever. And I had gone to a supervisor once before about him, and we had a supervisor that, for whatever reason, he would kind of preach that he was all about rules, about following doing things correctly. But with this particular case and this particular officer, he would kind of make excuses for whatever he did. Well, you didn't quite hear it right, he would say. I'm like, no, I heard it. I heard what he said to the person. Or we had a time where he was, clear illegal search, going into someone's apartment without permission, and looking through belongings when clearly there was no cause to do so. We had no business doing that. And then finding some drugs. And then he wrote, of course, his report, which had to be a lie. And then when I wrote my report with what was truthful, I had this supervisor kind of coming down on me. And so those were some very negative experiences. Hey, Miracle Mile in Tucson, I see that for Jiffy. Yeah, that's exactly where I was at.
Well, now, Chi-Town Citizen had asked, what about in instances, did you ever come across an instance where you saw another officer violating somebody's rights, be it their First Amendment right, their Fourth Amendment, their Second Amendment, what have you, and if so, what did you do?
I can say I never saw someone violate their First Amendment rights, but the police auditor thing wasn't really a thing when I was a cop, so you wouldn't really see that. Second Amendment, it's Arizona, it's a very pro-gun state. If you're violating people's Second Amendment rights, you're going to be a short-lived police career. But now Fourth Amendment, that's really where you see more trouble. And I can tell you, I've seen officers, you watch the show Cops, you can see people violating people's Fourth Amendment rights. If you watch Live PD, any of those shows, you'll see people right on camera going into people's pockets without really having permission to do so. And that's most of the type of Fourth Amendment violations you would see. It's things like that. Like somebody, let's say, patting someone down, and instead of patting the exterior of their pocket, which is what's the proper thing to do, reaching into someone's pockets, and officers doing things like, hey, you don't mind if I check your pocket, do I? Do you? Well, the officer's hand's already in the pocket.
Right.
So person the opportunity to decline it.
Right.
So, mostly things like that, things that are small that are critically important, because then now let's say the officer finds something in their pocket. How do they justify that?
Exactly.
They have to lie. There's no way, because if they say, I, stopped this person, and maybe it's a legitimate reason for why they were stopped, I was patting them down, which the Terry v. Ohio case governs pat-downs, which a pat-down is for weapons only.
Right.
It can't be for anything else. So if you feel on someone's pocket and it does not feel like a gun or a knife, that's it. Your search is over.
Right.
And one of the expressions we used to use on the police department is rubber band man. And that a lot of police officers are rubber band man, where they're constantly trying to stretch the law to suit their purposes.
Yep.
And when you do that, it will break. And I know, like I saw somebody earlier said something in the comments about, well, IA just slapped someone on the wrist. And sometimes that's true. I've seen it where an IA came back and actually over the one that I was talking about with the person that was destroying evidence, they did almost nothing. I actually suffered more consequences than they did, because then I had to deal with negative from other officers,
Right.
where this person, really nothing came of it. It was a joke. And there's several other people, that if you, the people, if anybody here who lives in Tucson, they know there are people that sometimes rise up to high ranks in the department that have had very spotty and sketchy records.
Well, yeah, see, one of the things that irks a lot of us as auditors is Fifth Amendment violations, where we're standing on the sidewalk or whatever. We're, like I explained to you before we went live, we're standing on the sidewalk. We are 100% absolutely legal, without a shadow of a doubt. There's no way in hell they could pin anything on us. We haven't done anything wrong. They still get in our faces, and if you don't give up your name, or if you don't talk at all, like you'll see in a lot of videos we call the silent treatment. That's generally the safest way for an auditor to react when they're faced with law enforcement. And the best thing to do is just be quiet. But there are many, many times where cops have slapped people in cuffs, thrown them in the back of the car, you name it. I mean, you can look at News Now Colorado, First Amendment Strike Team. It's happened to all of them. And what I don't get is, why do cops think they have the right to force people to talk?
I don't have a good answer for that. I don't think there is a good answer, because that's not what you were taught. So officers that do that, that is not what they are taught to do. But here's what I think happens psychologically. Because here, I'll tell you what you're trained to do. What you're trained to do is that the basics, and when you go to talk to somebody, there's basically, let's look at 3 levels of proof for when we talk to somebody. The first one is mere suspicion, which mere suspicion is nothing. That could be like somebody just kind of looked wrong. And believe it, people do look wrong. You see somebody walking down the street, there could be something about them that doesn't feel right. And that's a basic human survival instinct that we all have. When you pull up on your street, you notice a car that doesn't belong. You're like, who is that, right? Well, that's just mere suspicion. And with that, I can't do anything other than a consensual encounter. So most of these encounters that are the police auditor encounters, I'm going to say probably 99% of them, are going to fall within a consensual encounter, where they don't have anything beyond mere suspicion. And with mere suspicion, if you walk up to somebody as a police officer and you say, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And that person says, piss off. That person says, go away, no matter what they say. You have to walk away. You can't talk to them. You have to have the burden of proof of reasonable suspicion. And reasonable suspicion, a basic definition would be that you believe that a crime has been committed and that person may have been involved in it. I don't have to have proof they did it, but there's some sort of evidence leaning that some sort of criminal activity was afoot and this person was involved. Then you can ask for an ID. And then now we can actually detain somebody. But I can't do it with a person standing on the sidewalk. And I'm not understanding, or I'm not sure why officers do this. And I think I talked about it in my video, which some people are alluding to, with Cop Watch. When Cop Watch would film us, and they filmed me at least 2 or 3 times where they followed me all around, and it never bothered me. And I've just never understood myself why police officers are upset when someone's filming them. I don't get it. And one of the things that I really think is good is the body cams. And I wish I would have had them when I was an officer, because one of the things I used to do a vice-type detail, and I would have loved to have had a body cam for that, because it was one where people would constantly say something different than what actually happened, and I would have loved to have had a camera, but we didn't have those back then. Because I think the cameras keep the police more honest,
accountable,
and they keep the public more honest and accountable, both sides. Because, you know, like, and if you were to go to the city of Tucson, the city of Tucson is, or the state of Arizona is very different than California.
Yeah, but wait
California,
now, sorry, hold on, I don't mean to interrupt. I want to ask before
Sure.
it scrolls off the screen. Finbar Martin said, which is this guy's, he's over in Dubai, and he's brilliant at law. I mean, this guy's a genius, and he asks what you think on the usual, we got a call, you need to ID.
Well, I think if the police truly have a call, which that happens, I've been that many times, if they truly have a call, then that can be supported in court. Because in court, they're going to have to prove and show 911 records. And one of the issues on the street is, you know, people will want to litigate that on the street, and you can't litigate that on the street. And so if the police officer is saying, hey, I have a call about you, and this is why, and this is why I'm IDing you, and the call can't be just suspicious person. There's actually case law on that. If the call is just, hey, there's someone suspicious standing outside, well, then the police officer has to go and develop reasonable suspicion to determine what that is. And so that would be the example. Again, let's just say the call is suspicious people outside. So I pull up as a police officer and I see someone standing outside. I can't detain someone. I can't go and require anything. I can ask for an ID, but I can't require it. There's nothing there. Now, if the caller had said more detail, which they sometimes do, hey, these guys are selling dope outside, there's 3 guys, and what they do is they have their rock in the bottom of the mailbox, and when the car pulls up, then they go over and pick the rock out of there. And guys that sell street drugs, they have all kinds of different ways of hiding it. They don't keep it on them. You know, back in the days of payphones, they would put them in the coin slot. They'll put them in a bottle cap, the crack rock. There's all kinds of different ways. And if somebody calls in with details of what's going on, describes their clothing, and says this is what they're doing, okay, well, now we're at reasonable suspicion. But the types of things I've seen in police auditor videos, I've never seen one that it rises to reasonable suspicion where there's any reason that an officer can demand an ID. They can ask, but they can't demand.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons why we do this, is we're trying to get more people to realize that cops don't, you know, they do work for us. You know, they're not here to tell us what to do. And, you know, you asked me before we started this about the whole cop watching versus auditing, and how you lean more towards cop watching being appropriate, and auditing is more of something you're on the fence about. And
yes,
I explained to you that, you know, auditing is the most legal way we can express our rights while not worrying about being told we're interfering with cops in the line of duty, and still see whether they will respect our rights or not. So now, having learned this, and now that I've explained this to you a little bit, I mean, are you still? I mean, what do you still think about this?
Okay, and I'm being honest. I'm not a huge fan, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying that there's any. You obviously have a right to do it, and I've also stated I think police officers that object to it are fools. It's foolish to object to it. It's foolish to argue and fight with the person that's trying to video or trying to take pictures. It's dumb and it's foolish. The reason that I don't see, I'm just not seeing what the great benefit is, because I get it, it's exerting a right. Yes, I have a right to do this. But I'm not seeing where this actually changes real consequences for people. Like, because to me, I think if you were really serious about, hey, I want to root out police corruption, I want to root police abuse of people, I think there's some far better ways to do that. And I know, granted, some of that requires, like, say, an attorney, but like doing things like getting freedom of information requests and looking at arrest reports, looking at use of force reports, because that to me is where the real abuse is.
There's one thing that Tay Lynn said. I was just about to say it myself. There's one thing that you need to look up. It's a case called Turner versus Driver in Texas.
Turner versus Driver. I'm writing it down.
Yeah, it's applicable in other states as well. But Turner versus Driver stems from an auditor, Philip Turner. He did an audit in Texas, and he's an African American gentleman, and he was rough-handled, like manhandled real bad. You know, they roughed him up, they pinned him and put cuffs on him. And all he was doing was filming on a sidewalk outside a police station. I believe it was a police station. It's been a while. He goes by the name Battusai, Battousai, and he took it to court. He fought it the whole way and created case law. And now police lose their qualified immunity. They come out to auditors in these states where the law is observed, and the auditors are 100% legal. Like I say, they can't just come and say you have to do this, you have to do that. Give me your ID, whatever. Go stand across the street. The typical, they do what they want.
Right.
And they lose their qualified immunity now because of Turner versus Driver. And this is an auditor, and this was in the earlier years of auditing when it wasn't nearly as well known or widespread. And back then, nobody was doing live streams. And yet, here's this one guy, one auditor who believed in his rights and stood up for his rights, and he created law.
Hey Brian, let me just jump in really quick, and because I made a mistake I have my own live stream going on, and they can't hear you. So if you are on my channel, if you want to go over to Brian King's channel and check out his live stream, and if you just search Brian King, you're going to find it. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my live stream because they can't hear you anyway. And I'd rather just get them over to your channel.
Yeah, ain't no problem.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, but as I'm saying, that's one auditor who, in and of himself, created law. So, that shows you that we can make a difference.
Yeah, okay, and I guess my hesitation is that it seems to me like a whole lot of energy, and with really the victory being, hey, we can just take pictures of the police.
But it's not just that. That's just it. Your exposure to what we do is honestly, it's been very limited so far. We don't just go out to police stations. We don't just go to post offices. We go everywhere. Everywhere that it is legal, publicly accessible, or public property, we go. And, okay, well, somebody's questioning my saying Philip Turner was rough-handled. We can agree to disagree. The fact that he was put in cuffs at all, to me, means he was rough-handled. So, I've been in cuffs, they hurt. He was rough-handled. But, Regina, I'm not ignoring you, just so you know, Regina. I'm trying to keep up with everybody and everything. I can only ask so much.
You know, and one of the issues, because there was the flag issue, and one of the things we didn't get to on the flag issue was a little bit about the case law piece of it, right? And that, because a few people have commented that they said, hey, this is a desecration and it's an illegal flag. And that's just not the case. Now, you can argue desecration, or that you don't like it, or that this flag is offensive, but that, as of 1989 and 1990, for the Texas v. Johnson case and then the U.S. versus Eichmann case, it is a free speech issue.
Yeah, I know it is legal. I get that. We all understand that.
Well, that's one of the comments that I get a lot, is people saying, hey, this is an illegal flag, it violates the flag code. I get that comment repeatedly.
But my issue isn't about the legality of it. It's the, some people, like Perth just said, it's a piece of material. Some people don't agree with putting such emotion behind an object. But, I have a lot of military people in my family, and they disagree. The flag is what they fought for. It's the symbol of everything that they gave their life to support. So it's on principle. You have police stations that are taking down American flags and putting up blue line flags. And
they shouldn't do that.
But if you came to my house and I was wearing or had a bunch of red bandanas up, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
I'm sorry, if you had a bunch of what?
If I had a bunch of red bandanas up, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
Probably some sort of gang affiliation.
Exactly. So we see that blue line flag, and it's only, cops have blue lines in their bracelets, blue lines across their badge, blue lines in their rings now, blue lines on the cars. You name it, they're everywhere. And that's like, how is that any different than somebody waving a gang flag?
Well, because then now that's making an assumption that then the police are some sort of gang, which I won't go there. I will agree with you about the police misconduct issues, and that there are police officers that shouldn't be there, and that they need to work on removing officers that don't belong. But I will not agree that the police are some sort of gang.
Okay, no, see, that's fair, because, those of us, like I told you before, I believe there are good cops. I firmly believe there are good cops. I knew a good cop that arrested me, and he was wonderful. So, don't get me wrong here. I'm not going to say all cops are bad, they're a gang, let's go beat them up. I don't agree to that. What I also don't agree with, though, is it's okay if you guys want to have your blue lines, your blue line bracelets, whatever, but do not take down the American symbol and put up a modified American symbol. Some people don't like the blue line, period. But me, it's the flag is what bothers me. And I can tolerate a blue line sticker with just a blue line in it or whatever. That's fine.
Well, but here, this is where I would say, though, that this being a very First Amendment issue, if something is offensive, I think it's okay to point out that it's offensive, but not to demand somebody take it down.
Yeah, but they forced people, government buildings, all that stuff to take down the rebel flag.
And there's a First Amendment issue there as well. I would never fly it. I'm not a rebel. I don't come from any rebel family.
But the rebel doesn't have to signify racist or anything. It can just be history.
I don't know. I lived in Kansas, which I thought Kansas was a great state. I really loved my life in Kansas. But usually when I saw people flying Confederate flags, most of the time it was racist. I don't remember finding too many people that were like, hey, it's my Southern pride. I disagree with that. And, like I knew guys in the Marines that had tattoos where it was a cross, a Confederate flag on one side, and then the other cross flag was the Marine Corps flag.
Mm-hmm.
And it would say, American by birth, Southern by the grace of God, or something like that. And those people, the guys that would have that, would probably say, hey, it's a Southern pride thing. And then when you would actually have deeper conversations, you'd find that, no, that person's a pretty deep racist. I'm just very suspicious of a Confederate flag. Probably the way a lot of people here are about a thin blue line flag. I'm pretty suspicious of Confederate flags.
Okay, well, all right. So let's kind of shift gears here then.
Sure.
What's your take on inland border checkpoints and border patrol agents? I'm not sure how familiar you are with inland border checkpoint law, but
I'm not really familiar with the law on it at all. I mean, I'm aware of them because I live here in Southern California where we see these checkpoints, and I was a police officer in Tucson where you see a lot of those, but I don't really know anything about any sort of case law or anything about it because I've never done that type of enforcement.
Okay, well, I mean, the big issue here is there was a case law back in 77 or 78, Martinez versus Fuerte, where they basically said you waive your right to your Fourth Amendment, your Fifth Amendment, all that. Your Fourth Amendment. When you go to these checkpoints, they can sit there and say, okay, are you an American citizen or not? You'll see a lot of these videos now where they'll come up and they'll say, are you an American citizen, yes or no? And some of the people say, I don't want to answer that question. Now, there is an actual official Supreme Court ruling that says that citizens should not talk to law enforcement. It says that citizens should not talk to law enforcement. So now if you're in this line and you say, I'm going to observe my Fifth Amendment right to not answer your question, they can smash your window, drag you out, throw you on the ground, tase you, put you in cuffs, and search every square inch of your vehicle just because you didn't want to answer that one question. And at the same time, they let thousands and thousands of people go through just because they say yes. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, why don't you just shut up and say yes? Why don't you just answer their question? It's a principle. It's our right. Just like auditing, it's our right to do it. Do you think that's fair that they do that just because it's inland? Now, I'm not talking the border. I'm talking the inland border, where it's American soil, and they're doing this. I mean, do you have any kind of viewpoint on that?
I honestly, Brian, don't have a real strong opinion on that. I've never actually really thought much about it, because I know when I go through those checkpoints, which I go through quite a bit, because we go to San Diego, and then we come back, and quite frequently there's a checkpoint. It's on the 5 freeway in the Camp Pendleton area, and I've honestly never been stopped. They just kind of wave you on through, so I've never really thought about it.
Well, hey, yeah, I figured it didn't hurt to ask. Miss Constitutional, if you're still in the channel, what was your question? I can't. My phone is kind of being stood up against the microphone at the moment. She had a really good question she texted me too. If you're in the channel, Miss Constitutional, can you please post your question again? In the meantime, anybody else in here, you got a question you want to ask him? Well, James Jacobson brought up a good point about DUI checkpoints and running people for warrants and all that, and that being...
You're someone will probably agree greatly on DUI checkpoints are a scam.
You what?
DUI checkpoints are a scam.
Well, here you go, guys.
And so here's one point that I think we'll all agree on. DUI checkpoints are just a moneymaker for the police department. A lot of times it's Mothers Against Drunk Driving or some other organization will fund these. And here in Southern California, I can't say for the rest of the country, but whether it's Southern Arizona or Southern California, it ends up being more of an illegal alien checkpoint than anything else, or poor people checkpoint. Because what happens is you get, I think there's your Miss Constitution question, so I have to flag that to remember that one. But what it is you get, people coming through the checkpoint. Very few people are actually arrested for DUI. Very few. The vast majority of the offenses are warrants, driving on a suspended license, no insurance, no registration, which all of those offenses are very disproportionately affecting the poor. There's no other way around it, because people that have financial means, their license doesn't get suspended, they pay their registration and they pay their insurance. So a DUI checkpoint is really that. And there's actual data. And my viewpoint on criminal justice policy is to look at everything from a scientific point of view. There's a great author, Samuel Walker, who's no relation to me, from the University of Nebraska, who wrote a book called Sense and Nonsense About Crime. And the point of it is that you throw out your liberal or conservative beliefs when you look at crime, and you should look at where the data takes you. And the data on DUI checkpoints is that they're highly ineffective. And instead, if you took that money that they used for the DUI checkpoint and you paid overtime to have officers work in a two-person car driving around doing nothing but looking for DUIs, they would get 5-6 times the number of DUIs. If you were driving around looking for people driving drunk, you would find them. But instead, the DUI checkpoint is a massive money generator. And so if you're a police officer, it's very difficult. If you're the police officer, your supervisor says, hey, do you want to work overtime Friday for a DUI checkpoint? Very few people are going to say, no, I don't want to work overtime and dime at double and a half pay, even though you know darn well most of what you're doing there is warrant checks, registration checks. It's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I could go off on the DUI checkpoints for an hour.
Yeah, no, I agree. But, yeah, as Miss Constitutional was asking, now there was this thing, there was a very dear friend, the Centurion Report. He passed away a few months back, but he's very passionate about the 1033 program. Are you familiar with it?
Is this the militarization? About using surplus military
armored
stuff?
Vehicles, assault rifles, I mean, you name it, they're giving it to police stations.
I think the sad reality is, I think it would be nice if we didn't give that stuff to police, but I think the sad reality is we are living in a more and more hyper-violent world, and when you have incidents like the San Bernardino terrorist attack that we had here, if we had police officers stopping them with 9mm handguns, it would have been awful. We had the North Hollywood shootout here, where we had guys, with assault rifles and body armor from head to toe, and the LAPD was unable to stop them. They fired hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. So if we could go back to the 1950s and Andy of Mayberry, yeah. And and I don't think police officers should be rolling around in armored vehicles on patrol, but having that available for when something unfortunately very bad happens, which it will, it has happened and will happen again. I think that's an unfortunate reality of the world we live in.
Yeah, okay, so, ma'am, I just, okay, let's see what Steve says.
I'm trained to bring up CIA false flags. No, I haven't been trained by anybody.
What do you think?
It's just truth, God, Allentown, that I'm trained to bring up CIA false flags. Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, we got a question here for Steve Pinder. Steve Pinder is a great guy. He's a martial arts expert in Texas who he actually has a lot of cop friends, and he trains police in hand-to-hand combat. Now, his question, which is an absolute great question here, is, you know, you could see it on Live PD, you see it on anything, we see it in our own videos. Cops showing up that couldn't chase a donut down the street. Okay? I mean, guys that barely fit behind the wheel. And right. Some of them are rookies. Like, they just came out of the academy this way. You know, and it leads to more violent and often lethal encounter. Like, I think we're up to over 1,000 people killed by cops this year. You know.
But you know what, though? If you start looking at the data for police, so what Mr. Pinder has said is very accurate. What we do now, one of the things, but there's part of it's accurate and part of it isn't. The part that's accurate is police officers are less fit than before, but so is the general population. And police officers, it's fewer and fewer departments that require physical fitness standards, and that has to do with lawsuits. The city of Garden Grove here used to have very strict physical fitness requirements until they were sued by officers, and then the requirements went away. But as far as the deadly force encounters, and this is where you have to go and look at FBI data. The New York Times actually put a piece on this just within the last year. The number of violent encounters, deadly force encounters between the police and the public has dropped dramatically since 1970. It's dropped dramatically. And, like, when you look at each encounter as the individual event that it is, you can find one where the police shouldn't have done what they did. But when you look at them individually, most police deadly force situations were justified use of force, even though I know that's not a popular comment.
Well,
and the numbers, it's dramatically lower than what it was in 1970.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, it's just... It's still, to me, when I think of the number 1,000, you know, how many of those deaths were absolutely, irrefutably justified?
And that's where you'd have to go and scroll through and look at the FBI data. Look at how many of those were armed, how many was a crime in progress, how many was a truly unarmed person. How many were an unarmed person, which would maybe be something Mr. Pinder is alluding to, where the person was getting the best of the officer, and that's why it went to a deadly force situation.
To answer your question, Aaron, even though you're just a troll, I have speech to text. It's one of these miracle modern marvels for people like me who are deaf, so I can still see, and he talks loud enough, I can hear a lot, but the guy's just a troll, but I felt like answering him anyways. You know, I'm sure you got plenty of trolls on your channel too.
Occasionally. Although a pipe channel, most of my stuff is pipe smoking stuff, I get fewer trolls.
Yeah, we get trolls galore, man.
People get less emotional about their pipe tobacco.
Yeah, these guys, it's a never-ending train. I mean, you know, it is what it is. But, anybody else got any questions they want to ask here? Because, let's see, what is... New England Truth sent me 7 questions. Let's see what he says. It says, okay, well, let's look at number 4 here. He says, as a professor, do you feel the shift or trend in society today as it relates to subjective police state? I guess what do you mean? I think he's asking, you know, a lot of us are feeling like it's turning into a police state. And a lot of our hometowns, our home cities, and I mean, it is getting bad.
Well, I mean, what do you mean by a police state? Because I think I go most of my days, I'd say I go 365 days a year. I never even encounter a police officer. I don't get pulled over, and I don't have any magic license plates for them not to pull me over because I wasn't even a police officer in this state. I have very few encounters with law enforcement. And the only reason I think I even have any is because I teach at a college campus, and there's police officers on my campus. But I don't know. I don't know how. To me, that's a little conspiracy theory-ish.
Well, it's, in a sense, it's not, though. Like he's saying in the channel, Patriot Act, and you know, if you watch our videos, I'd say at least 80% of the time you're gonna hear, in this day and age, in this day and time, ever since 9/11, you know, I mean, 9/11, yeah, it sucked, but it was 20-something years, or 20 years ago, or whatever. I mean, you literally, we like make compilation videos laughing about cops saying in this day and age. You know, what's your take on that? You know, the cops using that as an excuse.
Yeah, I don't really have much take. I just think that, you know, I still just stand by that if you're out there filming, you're exercising your rights, and the police should leave you alone. At the most, they should go over and talk to you and say, hey, I'm officer whoever, and what you're doing, making sure that you aren't there for bad intention, but once they can hopefully rapidly determine that you're there and for no bad intentions, they move along. And that should be done very rapidly. And I know a couple people have been asking what I'm a professor of. I am a professor of the Administration of Justice, so I teach people that want to be police officers, and I am the department chair at East Los Angeles College.
I don't know if you see Black Label's comment or question. How do you feel when an officer lies on a report that leads to an actual arrest?
If an officer lies on a report, especially if it leads to an arrest, they should be prosecuted. An officer who lies on a report should be fired and terminated from their department. I think it's as simple as that. I will never support police misconduct ever. We might have disagreements. We might have disagreements about what police misconduct is. And then here, Kelly Thomas is a good example of police state and the cops walk free. The Kelly Thomas case is actually a very disturbing case. And I think probably most of you are probably familiar with it, but it's a homeless man who was beaten to death in Fullerton, which I live right next door. I go to dinner. We're down there. I walk past the scene where Kelly Thomas died regularly. And I play the entire video in classes of mine. People cry when they see it. Every time I have students bawling, and I would agree, like with it, that was a murder. There are a lot of things that indicated in that video, and that's something we could probably talk about for a couple hours. But with that video, where the police officers clearly had bad intention. I'm not going to say necessarily intention to commit murder, but it did, so maybe it ended up being like second-degree murder. And the fact that they got off is not because we have a police state. The reason they got off is our jury system is sometimes broken, and that proved beyond a reasonable doubt all it takes is one or two jurors to screw this all up.
Yeah, well, we learned that.
Someone's asking also, too, what my educational background is. No, I'm not a lawyer, but I was a police officer, and I have master's degrees in criminal justice and law enforcement. And now I've been teaching for quite a few years.
Yeah, see, we learned that lesson, though, geez, Rodney King, what year was that? Early 90s?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, like maybe 90, 91, something like that, 92.
I'll never forget it. I mean, I don't remember the year, but I remember what happened. But
yeah, it was like 91, 92, somewhere in that time frame. I was around. I was in Los Angeles. I was working, not as a police officer, but I was working in LA and Orange County, and I remember the entire city of Los Angeles burning and empty streets everywhere. It was awful.
Well, like Bob Homestead said, one punch could be murder. He is right. I mean, cops do need to be retrained. And
that's true, but what Bob says, one punch could be murder. This guy sucks somehow. Yeah, one punch can be murder but you have to understand statutes. And a lot of times people get upset where they say, "Oh, this police officer should have been convicted of murder." But you have to go off what the statute says, not the emotion. Because the emotion in the Kelly Thomas situation, which, again, I tell you, I play this in my classes every semester, and people get emotional. If you don't get emotional watching that video, you've, I think, got a dark heart, right? But if I'm going to charge someone with first-degree murder versus second-degree murder, now it varies in every state, or whether it's manslaughter or involuntary manslaughter. Those are very important, and a lot of the acquittals we've seen of police officers have been because district attorneys file the higher charge for political purposes to say, hey, we're pursuing murder. And had they gone for an involuntary manslaughter, they could have got a conviction. And that has happened numerous times. Right. Because district attorneys sometimes don't have the courage to say, hey, I don't have enough to support a murder charge, but I do have enough to support manslaughter or involuntary manslaughter.
Right. Alright, well, before we continue, I just want to remind you guys, you see right here, I'm trying to help out Nomad in his homeless efforts. I could do super chats too, they just take longer before I get them and then split it with him, so just so you guys know. But, back to what did he just say? Black Label just asked a good question. Oh, why is it okay for cops to lay hands on us, but, like, say we know we're right. We know we're in the right. We know we're legal. They have no reason to touch us at all. But if we defend ourselves, we're always
then it's
wrong.
Resisting. Right, and then it's going to be resisting arrest. And because the way the courts have interpreted it is that the right or wrongness of the police officer's behavior can't be litigated on the street. So it has to go to court. So if a police officer makes a determination in the field, right or wrong, hey, I'm detaining you. I'm going to put you in handcuffs. The courts have ruled time and time again, you cannot resist that. If you are correct and the police officer is wrong, that has to be litigated in court and not on the street.
Okay, well, that's just one of them touchy subjects. I mean, I've been manhandled, and I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of a group of cops that are twisting my arms behind my back and, tightening up these cuffs and shoved into a tiny back seat of a car, and I did nothing wrong. But, yeah, Taylin is asking, we have a gentleman, an activist that, we all support. His name is Eric Brandt, and he just recently was forced to go to jail for 90 days for sidewalk chalk. It was out of a municipal building of one sort. I don't remember if it was a courthouse or what, but it was on the sidewalk outside of a municipal building on public property. He got 90 days for that. Yet there was that cop that raped a woman in Colorado, and he was pled down to a 90-day charge. How, I mean, what is your view on that? I mean, a guy sidewalk chalk, 30
Yeah, so what do they charge him with? That can't be criminal damage.
No, they got, I don't remember.
Is it more like a contempt of court type of thing?
No, I don't remember exactly what the charge was. I know they twisted it in such a way that it was kind of like the equivalent of graffiti with spray paint and stuff. And because it was negative messages about cops, they made a huge, I mean, it was like on the news and everything, they made a big deal out of it. And it was nothing, vandalism. I believe it was vandalism. And he gets 90 days for this. But yet a cop
no one should get 90 days. Yeah, you should not have, that shouldn't be 90 days, it should be nothing. Because I've arrested a lot of people. I can't imagine someone gets 90 days for chalk on the sidewalk. That has to be a judge or somewhere where they're just deciding they're railroading this person. Because it takes a judge giving that sentence. And so some judge must have just decided he was irritated with this guy. Because contempt of a cop is one thing. Someone arrests you for contempt of cop. That's a real thing.
Right.
But a cop can only arrest you. It takes the judge to lock you up.
Okay.
And if you upset a judge will throw the book at you because that's 90 days is silly.
Yeah.
There's no justification.
Boomer verified it was criminal damage, and yes, he was in the process of a civil suit against the county, and he chalked basically what he did was he took chalk, he crushed it up, and he mixed it with rubbing alcohol. But it's still chalk. It's still legally chalk. And he chalked on the sidewalk, and they got him for criminal damage. And this was back in 2014. It took 4 years of being in court for them to give him 90 days. But his arresting officer is the one that raped a woman and gets 90 days.
Yeah, no, I don't know anything about that case, but 90 days is a ridiculous sentence if somebody was guilty of a sexual assault. I mean, there's obviously no defending that. And I don't buy, Denise, that that's a blue privilege thing. I know that's one of the things that gets brought up a lot. And my own experience is seeing police officers, when they go in court, they're not treated differently than someone else. As a matter of fact, sometimes as a police officer, you get treated more harshly by the judges because they think you should have a higher standard. And so that 90 days for that rape, I don't think that has anything to do with being a police officer. That must have to do more with quality of evidence, and that they felt they couldn't get more of that, because district attorneys do not like to waste their time. They like 100% conviction rate. They don't like to. It's a big flaw in the criminal justice system. But if they don't feel they have an airtight case, they don't file.
Yeah. See, Finbar Martin asked a good question. In regards to what is your opinion on police salaries and how they vastly outnumber what teachers get, where other countries it's the opposite.
I think police. One of the reasons you want police salaries, they shouldn't be exorbitant, but they should be a very good salary. That's one of the ways that you keep corruption down. And I know with the crowd I have here, people think, hey, well, the police are corrupt all over. I don't buy that as far as police stealing, shaking people down for money. That doesn't. It does not happen in the United States the way it does in other places, in other countries where police officers are very low paid.
Yeah, but wait a minute. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you basically,
Sure.
you just said, in order to keep them straight, let's give them more money. That doesn't sound a bit absurd to you?
Well, I think we have evidence from all over the world that what happens when you pay police officers very low wages, then lower quality people go, and it invites police corruption. We've seen that all over the world. You're not going to get high quality policing if you pay a very low wage, because then people are going to say, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to risk my life. I'm not going to risk all this negative stuff coming at me. In my own experience, I have been shot at. I've had people try to stab me. I've had people come at me with samurai swords. I've been hit with a bat. Had my car spit on. I've been spit on. I've been kicked in the head, punched. I've had all kinds of stuff happen. And to have those things happen to you, you don't want to do it. You're not going to get anyone to do it for low money. And somebody said lower quality people, and they're like complaining about that. You know what? There is a difference in the type of person you are going to get if you put a low wage onto that job. And I'm sorry if someone doesn't like the way that's said, but that's reality.
Yeah, okay, but now, so let's say that we agree to this, and we say, let's give them more money. I know, Ed, I understand. But if we say, let's give more money for quote-unquote higher quality people, then shouldn't those higher quality people be able to chase a suspect without falling over wheezing? Should be able to at least attempt to use non-lethal force as their first, second, and third options. I mean, you're talking about higher quality people that are in better physical shape, better mental shape, people that, aren't getting pulled over driving drunk and crying when they're taking their side of the road test. I mean, you're saying we should be having higher quality people, higher quality candidates as police officers, but look at the statistics of, look at all the DUIs, the DWIs, the cops that are addicted to drugs, look at even if you put all that aside, look at all the cops that are out of shape. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
You can watch anything, any cop show ever made, and you're going to see police so out of shape, they wait for the young rookies to show up to chase the guy.
I used to chase people and have my partner be 3 blocks behind.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about. But
I'm sorry, I'm kind of stuck on this lower quality people thing. I mean,
because you know what? Well, because here's the thing. Police officers are still human. We're all human beings. And when you subject somebody to years' worth of trauma, and I know a lot of the people on this feed don't want to admit or talk about that, the police officers have to be there when little 2-year-olds walk out into the street and are run over by cars. They see little kids cut up in dumpsters. They see the little baby that drowns in the pool, and they have to fish that baby out. I've had to take the dead baby out of a parent's arms before. Those type of things wear you down. But and the PTSD is a very real thing, and then that starts contributing towards higher levels of alcoholism, drug abuse, all of those things. So is it perfect? No, it's not perfect.
Shouldn't the system be better then? Shouldn't the system pay more attention to that? I've seen police officers, like where I live in Rochester, New York, and here, if you're making $40,000 a year, you're doing good. Now, the cops here, like, I believe the lowest paid cop in this city makes like $82,000. Now, that's the lowest paid, like, rookie I ever found that, made $82,000 That's rich where I live. 82 grand, you can live in a big 6-bedroom house with 2 acres and have 3 cars where I live. So, shouldn't that same $82,000 a year rookie or that $200,000 a year lieutenant, they should have to be more accountable. They should have to be tested. I don't care if they have to drug test them every week or every 3 days. You know, there's no excuse for this. You, like Denise said, you chose this profession. You chose it. You decided to dedicate your life to being a police officer, taking shots, taking spit, taking punches. You should at least be able to run down the damn street and still arrest somebody without killing them. I mean, I'm sorry. I know they say cops get tunnel vision, and, you know, I'm sorry, but that shouldn't even be possible when you're making 82 grand a year as a rookie.
But I think then sometimes what you might be asking for is things that aren't humanly possible. Now, I agree that police should be held to the highest standard. If they're suffering, if there's drug and alcohol issues, that should be dealt with. All of those things are important. But you're still talking about a human being. These aren't superhuman where they can go beyond what a normal person can.
No, but they can still afford a psychologist, a psychiatrist. They get great benefits. They get great pensions. They can, Steve Pinder.
Correct.
Steve Pinder is saying you're missing a lot. Like
well,
I said,
it's a phone conversation, Steve.
I know. I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try.
You're right, Steve. There's a lot. So he says I'm avoiding a big point. So what is the big point I'm avoiding? I'm
going to set up a follow-up interview with Steve, with him, Steve, and hopefully
I'd be happy to talk about it. I'll be happy to talk more.
Wait, hold on. I'm trying to read what Black Label said here.
Sure.
The ROE in the military is only fire when fired upon. Why do cops use deadly force first? Which is a very
first
good
of all,
question.
I would start off with the rules of engagement for the military to only fire when fired upon is a recipe for dead military members, including the Marine barracks in Lebanon, where the guys were standing there while a truck came barreling down on them. And there are Marines, sailors, and soldiers, Army soldiers, that are probably missing legs, limbs, because they didn't fire until they're fired upon. So I would not accept that that is the basis. I think once you perceive that threat and you have a weapon that's being pointed at you and it's a deadly force encounter, then no, I don't have to wait till I'm being shot at before I can shoot back at somebody.
Let's see. More specific, when a man runs from a... Yeah, see, that's true. This is
his,
by the way, guys, this is his link to his channel. If you want to subscribe to him, his channel is Law and Smoke. There's the link right there.
Okay, and so if a man is being shot in the back, generally that's not going to be a justified police shooting. Now, if you're telling me somebody who was shot while they were turning and facing, yes, and we had a case in Tucson. Patrick Hardesty is the police officer who was murdered. He was chasing a man through an alley after a hit-and-run accident, very minor crime, and you can look up the Officer Hardesty scenario. Officer Hardesty was shot when this guy was running away from him and pulled a gun out and fired back at Officer Hardesty and killed him. So in that scenario, had Officer Hardesty recognized the gun being pulled back and had fired, which he didn't, because he didn't recognize it, didn't see it, then he'd be one of these stats of somebody shooting someone in the back. So I'm not going to say that every shooting someone in the back is an unjustified. Now, if somebody is just running from you, you can't shoot somebody running from you, and then that would clearly be murder. That would be a murder case, like the one that was in South Carolina. That was murder.
Yeah, Bama. Yeah, no, Bama, I get what you're saying. I completely and utterly... I don't know the numbers. I don't have the numbers in front of me. But I mean, time and time again. Well, they're all saying Daniel Shaver. Are you familiar with Daniel
and
Shaver?
Is that the case? Is that the case in South Carolina?
Is that a South Carolina case, guys? I apologize. I'm not familiar with the name, but then again,
yeah, I forget because there's a lot of cases, but that sounds like that's the South Carolina one. Yeah, that was a clear murder. There's no way that you can defend that. I can't imagine. I mean, there's always apologists that will defend just about anything. And segue to the picture, civil forfeiture. Yeah, civil forfeiture is an interesting topic also. Hopefully disappearing, because that's in front of the Supreme Court right now.
Oh, yeah, that was the guy that was crawling. I believe that's the guy that was crawling. And,
Mesa, Arizona. Okay, now I know. Yeah, I know that case.
Fine, Steve.
Yeah, that...
Bum. yeah, that one. What is your take on that?
As somebody that should never be a cop, you watch that video. Okay, there's so many things that were wrong with that. The guy was shooting a BB gun or something, I think from his hotel room, or a pellet gun. He wasn't shooting a regular gun, or he was flashing it or whatever. Well, first of all, it's Arizona. Guns are legal just about in almost every circumstance in Arizona. Yeah, they pulled the kid out into the hall, and they were giving him very confusing commands, for one. And, that's a horrible video. The police officer in that case, I'm not going to call it a murder. I don't know if it was a murder, but it was very much at least manslaughter at the least.
Yeah, him begging. I mean, that was
that was a horrible, horrible video, horrible incident.
Yeah, it was. Absolutely. I mean, jeez.
It was bad policing all the way around.
There's so many cases we could talk about. What I'd like to do is a follow-up, and I'd like to get multiple people on the line. So,
and if people want to prepare questions too, and ask me questions, I would be glad to answer as best as I can.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to answer all of them because I got to save some stuff for the next show, man.
Right, but for the next one, even if you put down questions, I would be glad to answer them to the best of my abilities.
Yeah, I'm going to try to do it where I can get multiple people on the phone or whatever. We do like a party line, whatever you call it. Steve Pinder's about to go live next. I recommend that you, Kurt, check him out. I mean, you may actually like the guy. He's got a lot of cop friends, and
yeah, I will check out Steve.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Great guy.
And I've been subscribing to more of the auditors because I do want to watch your videos. I've watched quite a few of them, and I think the ones that show up in your feed, when I wasn't subscribed, sometimes
I think Steve wants you to call in his show. Steve, are you trying to steal all my glory, dude? If you're okay with it, Steve, I'll pass in your number if you want.
Yeah, and anybody, you can email me, Steve, because on my channel I put my email address out there, mysmokinglaw@gmail.com.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to keep this growing. I mean, the whole point of this is to help each other see each other's side of things, but also to help educate new auditors and people that are trying to figure out whether this is right for them or not. And Steve, he's saying he'll call into my stream next time. Okay, I get you, Steve.
Okay.
Misconstitutional. I'm gonna let Steve go live. I don't want to step on his stream. We can keep that for next time. I'll set up a time to do this again with him. And, like I said, guys, if anybody wants to chip in on there, to donate, half of it's going to Nomad and the homeless in Washington. So, the PayPal's there, or Super Chat, whatever you prefer. But I appreciate everybody coming in. Steve, I don't want to step on your stream, man. I got some people that are saying goodbye, other people are saying keep going.
Well, I can talk longer if you want.
All right, right. Well, okay. I mean, what about?
Well, actually, we are pushing 7, so it's been about an hour and a half. So if somebody wants to get another question in, and then we can call it a day.
Constitutional asks, Stanford Prison Project and your thoughts.
I'm not sure which is that. I'm not sure what that is exactly. Yeah. I've heard of it, but it's not ringing any bells right now.
See, now Tennessee News is asking if you would be willing to step in our shoes and go cop watching or something. Yeah,
I've already actually emailed. I think it was Pikes Peak that
Pikes Peak's auditors.
We talked about. Yeah, I'd be willing to go with somebody. I'd be willing to ride with somebody and be an observer with them.
Yeah.
And
I could set that up. I know exactly who the perfect person would be to go with because he's been doing it a long time. And Nuckin, he already answered that an hour and a half ago. But
how is this guy, Professor Froggy Master? Man, you're not being nice to me, man.
No, that's Froggy, dude. That's just Froggy. He does that. Yeah, Miss Constitutional, I'm not sure what you're talking about either, so I can't really help you there. But Furry Potato, I don't know, Denise. Furry Potato might be a bit much for him. I don't know if you've ever watched Furry Potato's videos.
No.
Oh, she's an awesome, I don't know what your opinions are, but to me, she's a lovable, wonderful person. She's a transgender auditor who goes out in a pig costume sometimes, wearing the blue line flag as a cape. And
that would be fun.
The idea with Furry is that she goes to the extremes, but she's still 100% legal.
Yeah, and somebody said I'd have to go incognito. Of course I would, because I'm not a police officer in the state of California, never have been. I wouldn't be wearing any sort of police paraphernalia. I'd probably wear my Iron Maiden shirt or something like that. Rock and roll stuff.
Oh, okay. Where students were assigned as either guard or prisoner. I saw that.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, if you look at the Stanford Prison Project, there's actually some stuff that have come out about that recently that a lot of it was faked.
Oh, really?
And that has just recently come out. So Caroline and Fort Worth, look at that. That some of the people, there was some faking of that.
Yeah, that was crazy when I watched that. I had a hard time believing it myself, but, Yeah,
because I remember watching that in psychology class years ago.
Yeah, I think
and they talked about it when I worked in the jail. They talked about that and about avoiding that and trying to make sure that, you don't succumb to that type of behavior.
Oh, now, see, I just remembered a question Finbar Martin asked.
Iron Maiden, typical CIA band, hey.
What is your take on cops that moonlight as security guards?
I don't think there's any problem with it. The only problems come up is if you are doing it in any sort of shady business. You don't want to be the security guard at strip clubs or places where there's a lot of illegal activity going on. You have to be very careful. There's a lot of ethical considerations that can happen, as people that are now paying you to be a security guard will then expect something in return. So they have to be pretty carefully done and managed by the department. And so it should be things like whenever you see sometimes the police officers on the highway and they're blocking traffic for the construction workers, that's technically a security guard role for the police. I used to work as a high school security officer where I was a police officer in police uniform, but the school district was paying me to be a security officer. Things like that. Nightclubs, that's ridiculous. They every now and then they would do the nightclub thing, and that's asking for trouble. There's so many. In the principle of it, I don't disagree with. It just has to be done carefully.
Yeah. See, Miss Constitutional is another one you should talk to. She actually has several years of law school under her belt, and she's just all around brilliant. So, I mean,
well, Miss Constitutional, I will. If she has a channel, if she does put any content up, I'll subscribe.
Yeah, she does. If you just clicked on her icon, you'll see her channel. But, see, that's just it. That was my thing about bringing you on to here is because when I watched your videos, the first thing that came to my mind is you didn't watch enough. That was my first instant take on your video. Is you watched a lot of perhaps people that aren't really in this for the right reasons. There are people that do this strictly for monetization.
And that's what my perception was, because I'll confess that. Because as I've seen, I think that's maybe what shows up in your feed, because sometimes those are the most popular videos, where it's a very confrontational and sensationalized one.
Right. Well, they definitely have their entertainment value. I get that. But you're a monetized channel, so you know we're not, unless you have boatloads of subscribers and you're getting hundreds of thousands of views, you know, you're not making any money. Crap.
No.
So
no. I make enough money to supplement my tobacco budget. That's what I do.
mean, I don't like you. You know, it takes 3 months just to get up enough money for YouTube to actually give you the money.
Right, because they have that $100 threshold. Yeah, we're not making big bucks.
Yeah, we're not getting rich here. So, I mean, yeah, News Now South Carolina is definitely another one. He's a new guy. He's just like exploded on the scene, and he's already over 10,000 subscribers. He's really good because the way he talks to the cops, he's very polite, but he's also very, very firm. He doesn't allow them to interfere with his rights at all. Like, you gotta watch the guy. I mean, he's an honest to God auditor. He's not in it for money. He doesn't care about.
And what's his name again, so I can look him up?
News Now South Carolina.
News Now South Carolina.
You'll find there's a lot of News Now names. It's really annoying, but like News Now Houston started it, and he's kind of considered one of the godfathers of auditing. You know, he's got like 120,000 subscribers. He's been doing it for years. Then you got Black Label Cop Watch, who he does a lot of live streams, and he does video analysis, and he's done a few audits and cop watches himself. So look up Black Label Cop Watch, but it's Black Label with the number 3 instead of the letter E.
I'm going to look that one up too. I'm going to subscribe to both those.
Yeah. Brian, I'm going to tell you, I support him because I think News Now Houston has done a great job. So, in Carolina and Fort Worth, you see her in the channel there. She makes really funny videos. Like, she kind of parodies us. So if you're ever bored, you know, you watch her videos, you'll laugh your butt off.
I'm going to probably do a little bit of that later tonight. Actually, I probably won't, because I'm going to have to go actually spend time with my family. That's like, why are you spending all this time on this video? So it's past 7, so I think we got to call it a day.
Yeah,
so Brian,
we're coming up on another 45 minutes anyways.
I want to thank you very much, because I think this is a very good discussion, and I appreciate how kindly you've treated me, and I would be glad to come back anytime that you want. If you want to send me questions that I can even respond written, I would do that. Anything you want to ask me on camera, I'd be perfectly glad. There's nothing that's off limits. There's no topic that I wouldn't address. I remember when I was at Fullerton College taking criminal justice classes, the police captain that was teaching the class for the Anaheim Police Department, they were discussing an incident where supposedly some officers threw a suspect off a roof of a house. And students asked questions about it. And this professor basically shut down the conversation and said that never happened. And a student was saying, no, I saw it on the news. These officers, they were from the gang unit, and they threw the suspect off the roof of the house into the yard. It was like a, one-story house, right? It didn't kill the man, but I'm sure it hurt him. And he just shut it down. And I remember thinking back then, I wasn't a police officer then, I was in the military taking classes. If I am ever a police officer, or if I'm ever a professor, which that was my goal back then, to become a community college professor, I would never, ever shut any conversation down, and I would never discount any accusation of police misconduct. And that stuck with me. And so whatever the topic is, any topic is open. I'm not going to discount anything. I just want to be open and have good conversation.
Yeah, and maybe we could shoot for doing it again like next week or something, you know, bring you back.
I'd be glad to. You let me know when. I'm teaching this winter session, but I don't teach any night classes, so I'm pretty much available in the evening most nights. Other than next Thursday, because next Thursday is the Orange County Pipe Club, so if there's any pipe smokers here, you can show up.
Okay, well, yeah, well, thanks.
Check us out on Instagram.
Thanks for being so open with us, and I really appreciate it.
Very welcome. All right.
I'll get in touch with you.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Like I said, guys, anybody wants to, you know, help out with doing a donation there, I appreciate everybody coming in. Hopefully we can help out Nomad a bit. You know, and like he said, guys, you know, send me your questions or whatever. We'll set it up again. We'll do this. I'm going to try to get a hold of more people and kind of try to make this more of a thing, you know, bringing in people from all sides of the spectrum and get everybody's point of views and go from there. I think it will benefit everybody, especially new auditors, you know, help them adjust to reality, you know. So many auditors go out there not knowing anything. So, I think that overall, we can really use this as a platform to help people. And I think bringing people in from the opposite side of the spectrum helps both sides understand better. So, you know, well, there's the link. Miss Constitutional posted it. Perth, if he does, it's on his channel. See, this is both not just for Nomad, but somebody else who doesn't want to be named. So, but Nomad, I believe, has a link on his channel. Well, Baker Street Piper, you know, in a way, it's reality. You know, you're going to encounter people that agree and people that disagree. There's tons of trolls in here. There's, you know, like Aaron V. Cox there, you know, he's a massive troll. Perth, that had nothing to do with me, and if I had to show my PayPal to somebody to prove it, I'd do it in a heartbeat, so that was nothing to do with me. Yes, Aaron is a troll. So, but I appreciate you all coming in. I mean, it is what it is, guys. You know, I could have just as easily said, hey, there's my link, donate to me. But no, I wanted to try to help Nomad out, too. So, yeah, I get it, Baker Street Piper. But I try not to be yelled at for silencing people just because they called somebody a name or whatever. You know, my moderators don't block people just for calling somebody a name. And, you know, it's like this Aaron fool, you know? Well, I appreciate it, man. thanks for stopping in. You know, like I said, guys, it's like I didn't just say, hey, donate to me, thank you. But I was trying to help Nomad out, too. As well as somebody else who's not being named. So... well, there you go. Miss Constitutional Vixen would like to have a chat with you. If you're still in the room. Vixen, subscribe to her channel and just leave a comment on one of her videos, and that's why she'll get a notification, and then she can hook up with you. Thank you, Mystery. I appreciate that. Okay, well, guys, trolls aside, I appreciate you all coming in. I appreciate you all hanging out, spending a couple hours with me, and I'm going to set this up, you know, maybe for next week. So, I'll have a good night, guys. Have a good weekend. I'll talk with you all later.